Excuse me, Thomas, if I were a Martian that is coming to the Earth today and I call you about the US election, you will vote on November 5th?
Correct.
Yes. If you had to explain me what's happening, what you would say me about that, about the elections?
Yeah.
What's your feeling, your intuition?
My guess is that what will happen is that in a moral way, the left will attempt to take the election.
Oh, they'll steal it again. You think she's going to win?
I don't know that.
Remember, let me say this, Tomas. In Argentina, you can say whatever you want because it's the truth. So just say the truth.
I think they're going to win. I think, but not legitimately. I think because it appears to me that the left or the woman in power on the left, who they're trying to put in power, is sponsored by not just like tech billionaires and things, but also and supported by the media. It seems to me that companies like BlackRock and State Street and stuff, who kind of make the calls on financials and things like that, with the exception of like, New York and California's, trading and things like that. But it seems to me that the powers that be are fighting to keep themselves in power. And what tends to happen when people try and stop corruption, historically speaking, as far as I can tell, is that whoever's trying to stop it usually ends up persecuted. And I feel like I've seen that not just on the scale of the U.S., but I feel like I've seen that on micro scale inside, like our organizations and things. Well, I can tell you that my opinion is just that I'd rather have the economics taken care of. Like, I'd rather make more money. That's a popular opinion, especially in my area, for people my age. But, I'd like to be able to afford groceries, and I'd like to be able to make a large amount of money and be able to have a good life. Like, then, I don't care about all this, it's not just I'm heartless or anything, but, we're just repeatedly serving more and more of the minority at the expense of the majority.
Like reparations, like that type of thing, reparations.
Well, not just reparations, just the, like all of this weird gender stuff, like, and not even that, like, just, you have to put a third bathroom in these places, and like, don't even get me started on all of the sports type stuff.
Yeah.
And this is the type of stuff people are worried about. They're like, oh my God, drag queens are leaving the kids, and I'm like, who cares if you can't afford to eat? Like, I don't understand how you can fight for this. Everybody's debt on debt, and I get that it works for the big guys, but for someone who just got out of school and I don't know. For me, it's all about the economics of things. I'd rather make more money.
Do you feel like
I'm an investor. I'd rather have my investments pay off, like, kind of thing. Then, do I feel like what?
No. Do you feel like you're not able to speak freely and express your opinions, or?
A little bit. I think that what's started to happen that, and politics have always been pretty rough and tumble, but I do feel like people have started to make it so that if you express an opinion different than theirs, I have friends who are like this, who haven't talked to me in years because of It's an opinion that I expressed, and it's not because I have hostility for them.
Uh-huh.
I don't agree with that. I also don't think that I need to be excommunicated because I don't agree with you.
Well, you're a person who has a lot of confidence, and you're very, very blunt. You're candid.
But I think the other problem is this. I think that there's some misrepresentation on both sides of like what the issues they'll help with are. And I think a lot of people seem to vote their personality more than like what they actually believe. So, and what's good for them.
Yeah.
So a lot more, it seems to me usually like the more creative types and the people from the arts tend to be more left-leaning. People who are employees and union guys, they're more left-leaning at the moment. Although if you go out into, you know, the rural parts of Illinois, my parents have a home in, you know, the country, and those guys are all very red. Like,
excuse me,
you know,
excuse me, Thomas. The first time I was here studying the Trump phenomena, it was 8 years ago, and I made a trip around Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio.
We've known Donald Trump for 30 years. We knew that he was a playboy. We knew that he was part of the exciting scene of New York City. We've known all those things, okay? And the fact of the matter is he's challenging the very core of government. You're right, he's not a politician. He sees a problem, he wants to solve it.
And I still see now the Trump name is still a taboo here.
It's a taboo?
Yes.
I would say it's a taboo to believe or bring up, yeah. I would agree with that, especially in big places like the city. You know, I would agree with that. I feel like, you know, his name's just been trashed so much over the last few years that it just seems like there's a yeah, I would say so. I would say he's divided people, not necessarily intentionally, in a way that's really strong. And so if you bring him up, you know, people will be upset about it.
Well, for example,
but excuse me, but there is an interesting phenomena here in Illinois that is happening since 8 years ago, that Democrats are losing the vote in the suburban areas of Illinois. If it not were by Chicago, Democrats would be losing the state of Illinois. It's a new phenomenon. It's a new political phenomenon. It's new.
But I think too, the problem is they make, you know, everything's so expensive. Like, I can tell you that, you know, I grew up in a suburb of Chicago, and, you know, my parents moved out of it recently too. And I will say this, too, you know, as an addition, they moved to a more like foresty rural area. And
his family's from my area.
But they significantly upsized their house in this other area, but the taxes are lower. So like the town I grew up in, I watched it change a lot over the years. So when I was growing up and going to school there, it was kind of you had white collar people and blue collar people working in the same area, like working class and lower upper class people, all in the same spot. And as time has gone on, it's become a lot more like lawyers, doctors, you know, lower upper class type people. And the taxes, I can tell you, have skyrocketed.
Yep.
You know, and the expenses are just crazy. And so in the suburbs, I suspect, a lot of those people are trying to raise something like that. Where, what's going on. The big cities are where the liberality is, because that's where you have all the young guys that are out of college. And
there is
a lot
excuse
of these,
me, Thomas, there is a reference that people here makes me all the time talking about Trump. They told me they tell me Trump is a businessman. It's like a way of saying me that he's understanding what you are talking about. Our problems is in relation to the daily life, to the economy, to the cost of expenses, groceries, and.
Well, I suppose that could, be true. I feel like, for me, it's more about the personality of him. First of all, he's already individually wealthy. So he doesn't need to take big donations from big donors and stuff, which is why they hate him, of course, because they can't control him with money and other things like that the way they can the other politicians. And the other thing, I think, is he has such an ego on him. He's going to want to do a good job. He's going to want the country to be phenomenal in every way. And it's not going to matter what other people are funding to try and make him do. He's going to want to make it, his own way. So I suppose I will say, he's not like a scholar or one of these guys. He's perfectly smart and all of this, but he's been working with construction guys and stuff like that his whole life. So he's talking to these, blue collar guys, and that's kind of why he speaks the way he does in certain ways. Where he has to be on TV, where everybody has to understand him. So I think there's a place for him, for his way of being, which is to kind of say to people like, nope, you're wrong, you're fired, get out.
Yeah, to
and
show
I think
everything.
there's so
and Democrats no.
They just come at it. It seems to me like they come at it from like almost a theoretical standpoint. Like they read all this stuff and they have all this skill and knowledge that they learned at school in Yale or whatever, and they think they know how things work in theory, but they're reading the book of a college professor who generally isn't out there doing that stuff.
Yeah, it's the economy of the academia.
So exactly, that's actually a better word than I could have worded it. It is the economy of academia, and I feel like Trump has real world experience in managing money, managing businesses, and putting good deals together. Even people who don't like him, who used to work with him, will tell you, they'll be like, he can come into a room. Forgot what she was talking about. She was talking about a deal between him and the Chinese.
In a certain way, is a similar phenomena what is happening in Argentina now in relation to Milei. It's a way of people is saying maybe louding, and it's a big shout of the people saying we want some guy as a president that understand the economy and how it works and how it works the business.
Right. Who's been out there doing it and not just learning about it in the class. That stuff is useful if you learn about it and then go out there and do it repeatedly. But again, I think for me, not only does he understand that like that, but he also is individually wealthy. because of his understanding of it. Like when he was, when the recession hit, he had all these banks leveraged to so they couldn't collapse on him. Like if one of them, tried to pull out of his investments, then they'd all go down. So they all had to stay. He's just great at putting the kind of pressure on people in other countries that battles, I suppose you would say, going on the global scale, much, years and years ago, way before he said anything for election. I remember watching different interviews about it, and it's, I think keeping up with countries like China and stuff is really important, because China, first of all, if China becomes the new dominant world superpower, which I don't see happening for various reasons, at least not yet, I just don't think people would want to back, like the other countries would want to back China for, as a global
Like taking over the south of Argentina, they're trying to do.
Morally speaking, I don't think people would trust China to run everything the way that the U.S. is trying to right now. But I will say this, there are a lot of advantages, especially at the political level, that China has in boosting themselves and boosting their economy and things. Like, for example, their type of government, with their leadership, allows them to make snap decisions really quickly. They don't have to go through a lot of parties and stuff, because one guy can kind of make all the calls. And I think in America, there's a lot of there's a lot of powers to stop it from overpowering itself, but they can also kind of be used. They can kind of get in the way of making those kind of decisions and stuff. So, for me, if America loses its status as a kind of global superpower, then everyone in the country gets immediately poorer overnight, and by an extreme amount, and becomes kind of a second-class citizen. And I don't think a lot of people understand what it's like as an American traveling to another country. Like, people will treat you differently based on your passport and things. So I can tell you it's one of my plans for, if that sort of thing starts to happen, I would get Irish citizenship just to be able to move around through other countries without
visas.
Excuse me, Thomas. Beside the economy, Trump fights around another area of politics that is related what they label as a cultural battle. Milei talks about the same, for example, abortion, immigration. That in fact, Trump went out of the traditional view of the Republicans, that they stimulate and promote the free migration in all the times. But now Trump fights a lot about the migration, and you see, for example, his idea of building a wall to divide the U.S. From Mexico, and another topics of cultural battle. How do you think that cultural battle is received maybe by the Americans who live in cities, in urban areas, for example, Chicago, or maybe another ones where the Democrats have a lot of power, no? Electoral power, and maybe they reject that kind of visions, and for example the abortion is maybe a topic that Democrats fight about?
I think I will tell you I don't know I have no idea how immigration has been sold. The immigration situation that's happening has been sold to the American people. I couldn't tell you why that is the way it is. As far as the other issues, it's just what people are caring about right now. I think the cultural issues, there are, I think, part of the problem is when they started introducing all of these cultural issues and fighting with it, I think people are looking for options. They want to be able to have safety, right? So if you're a college kid coming to live in the city where it's expensive to live and have no experience in the world, which is a great deal of the amount of people I live around, certainly, and you can't afford to buy a house, you can't afford to, groceries are expensive and blah blah blah. These issues seem really important. Like, why wouldn't you go back with them? Because it appears, I think what's happened, especially recently, is because people have turned a little bit more against the government, especially since the COVID situation. The cultural issues have become conflated with, issues of religious or moral belief. Because people don't trust the government anymore, they're turning their morals to religion and.
That's a very important topic you're talking about, Thomas, because the polls of last year, the only institution in U.S. that has maybe a bigger trust of the people are the army, but maybe it's the only exception. If you talk about justice, the Supreme Court and other institutions, the media, all the trust of the people is absolutely broken.
Yeah, because and part of this is because of Trump's first time around, where he started going fake news. That's not true. Playing clips against the media and different things. He didn't really sit there and take it the way that a lot of other politicians can do, because he was already a big fish in the system. So he may not be like Zuckerberg big, but I feel like the religious institutions and stuff, those kinds of things, people are turning to them now because they don't trust the government. And so what's happened is all of the moral issues that used to be big in religion are becoming, there's a lot of pieces to this. There's, I think, so many facts. It's hard to, that's why I think more people vote their first. The, gay marriage and things like that. Gay marriage is, I think that was a great, step or whatever. And I think they should have stopped there for a while, because the way that I look at politics and progress in politics is it's kind of like working out. The left is kind of like the day you go and weightlift and rip up your muscles. Like, you need to make some progress and move forward. And the right, they're both right, is kind of like when you take your rest day and your muscles are healing. Both are needed in order to grow your body. You can't have one or the other. Or if you just rest all the time, you'll never get big. And if you just weightlift the same areas every day, you'll just tear up your muscles and get skinnier. So I think they're both right, but I think what's happened is the left has pushed a lot of those issues we're talking about so far, it's like a rubber band. It's snapping back the other way, the cultural direction. You can see the underlying social forces, and I think that's why Trump is probably aligning with a lot of those forces now, because he's trying to get into a position where people can trust him to morally, can trust his leadership. I think that's why he's backing a lot of these conservative, points of view and stuff like that as well. I think these other, these young kids just don't know how the world works yet, and so it's easy to believe when you're coming into a position as an employee into these big institutions that there's that everything can. It's the academic economy. Like, they've studied everything in theory, and they've been in college, which is, for all intents and purposes, kind of like a pleasure island, where they're just doing everything they want all the time, and their educational quality has gone down and down and down. I mean, really, there's a guy who was getting protested at colleges, and he was able to completely get stopped being protested over his conservative points of view. And the way that he did that, like with no protesters after a while, was he started holding his lectures at 8 in the morning. And you know why that's funny is because none of the college kids will drag themselves out of bed to protest someone so evil, because it's not important enough to get out of bed for.
In fact, I'm going to New York tonight, and I have a professor of political science in Columbia University that's a friend of mine, and he told me yesterday that he can't receive me in the university due to the protests of the students. The university now is not allowing the professor that he can receive people from outside the campus. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's just trying to control the viewpoint so strongly, but I think you're just going to get people going the opposite direction even more strongly. Like, the more you try and push something.
For me, U.S. was always seen as a paradise of liberty, and when someone hear about the word prohibition, it's like it's not related to America. America was another, and maybe the main reason of the soft power of America is related that it was like a temple of liberty, and not China. No one wants to go to live in China.
Just so you can't talk here.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think a couple years ago, though, to that point, I think you look at a lot of these companies that are trying to control the narrative through all of these systems. A couple of years ago, they could do that. That was the mentality that Americans had: freedom, freedom, freedom. And you could go. You didn't have access to the type of information we now do. Where it's very hard to hide. Well, now we're going the opposite direction, where not only with AI, where you can create things, but before that, it was very hard to hide things.
Yeah,
because everything was caught on video all the time.
Right.
And
I
think they can't control the narrative the same way they could when freedom was the mentality. So now it's a different type of control.
Yes, okay.
I'll also say that historically speaking, following COVID, all of these countries that started with disease, historically speaking, tend to come up with dictatorial control after that. Because there's a lot of, psychologically speaking, correlation between someone who's highly clean and orderly, trying to keep everything in its proper place, and dictatorship, being super type A and crazy.
Sure, I feel when maybe Trump and the Republicans talk about maybe the soul of America is in danger, I feel that I find some sense in that reference, in that speech.
Yeah, I think so. I think because it was once something where it was really, back in like the 80s or so, or maybe even the 90s, you could kind of start your own life. And, you had your own life, you could make your own decisions. The family structure was really strong. And, I think that's really the core of it. I think you have a lot of these guys who are coming into the city, who live in the city by themselves. Certainly where I live, I can tell you there's a lot of people who have a lot of problems with their family, and they don't talk to them and different things like that.
Yeah.
And they adopt these liberal points of view because they want the system to parent them instead of their parents.
Your family is atypical because you're so close. You're just all wonderful. Yeah, it's rare. This is true. Or Dennis and his family, very cohesive. So
yeah.
Maybe you're saying that the people with a little bit more conservative thing have a closer family, perhaps?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the family structure is a huge portion of it.